Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us for AFMI's 32nd annual conference. Sorry about the delay. Obviously, we're trying to get this set up, but I do think it's a very special conversation we're about to have. And Saleeh is actually a very rare person in the landscape of American Muslims. He has taken the time to be with us today, so we're very grateful for you being here. And this is a time where there's so much cultural erosion going on, especially for Indian Muslims. You could call it South Asian Muslims. We've seen so much going on in the news. They're taking Tipu Sultan out of the books. They're taking Aurangzeb out of the books. They're taking all the Mughal history out of the books. And all of us who are here as Indian Muslims, we've seen the country that makes the most hufaz in the world is India. The reason India was able to survive over 1,000 years is a strong legacy of our predecessors of bringing Islam there for us to live as minorities, have a strong history of scholarship that has allowed us to maintain our identity, not just in India, but also in the United States when we came here. So there's a huge legacy, and this is an opportunity for us to understand that and appreciate it. Because what does it mean to be Indian in 2022 living in America? What was our history in India? So I'm very delighted for this conversation. It's something I've been kind of following Saleeh online and his conversation. So he was born and raised in the Bay Area. He studied at Columbia University, studying post-colonial theory, Mughal and Ottoman history, and Sharia outside of Orientalism. He's currently a master's candidate at the University of Chicago, focusing on the late Mughal period and the rise of colonialism in India. His primary interests are Hanafi legal theory, Indian Persian poetry, and creative writing. He's also completing his Mufti degree at Darul Qasim. All right, without further ado, Saleeh Bashir.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Alhamdulillah wa kafa. والسلام على من لا نبي بعده ولا أمة بعد أمته ولا كتاب بعد كتابه ولا شريعة بعد شريعته ولا صحابة بعد صحابته. I wanted to read a poem from Iqbal. That's his own handwriting on the far right. And the reason why I mentioned Iqbal, because I think in many ways the Islamic intellectual tradition in India crystallizes in him. So he says in his Bayam al-Mashriq, Chuni dawra asman ki kam dida bashad. Chuni dawra asman ki kam dida bashad ke Jibreel amin ra dil kharashad. Che khosh deri bina kardand anja ke parastad mu'mino kafir tarashad. That Chuni dawra asman ki kam dida bashad. What does this mean? He says that the worlds have never seen. Dawra asman is the rotation of the heavens. They have never seen such a sight like this. Yani that is Sarazamina Hindustan. Ke Jibreel amin ra dil kharashad. That the heart of Jibreel alayhi salam is trembling at the sight of this. What side is this? Che khush deri bina kardand anja. What a wonderful civilization that has been built here. Ke parastad mu'mino kafir tarashad. That the kafir, the non-Muslim, carved idols, and the Muslim continue to worship Allah. And Iqbal, in the secret of this, we call it ruba'i, or a four-line poem, is that he's asking us to reflect upon the Islamic civilization in India. Yani hamari hukumat aato saal chal uthi hai Hindustan mein. So what did we produce? What did we gain? And he links it back to Jibreel alayhi salam, i.e. to wahi. Right? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the first three verses of Surah Najm? وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَلَى الْهَوَى إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. Right? So this idea of إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى, it's a civilization of wahi. So wherever you go in Dar Awalim Islamiyya, wherever you go in the Muslim world, you will always find that we are a hadara, a tahzeeb, a tamaddun based on wahi. That is, we have a divine ethical relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And how is this manifested? Right? And I think, again, Iqbal becomes really important. Right? He was born in 1877 in Sialkot in British India. Died in which year? Does anybody know? 1938 in also British India. Right? As we know the famous couplet of his, Agarche zada'i hindam farokh chashme manast zakhake pake Bukhara o Kabul o Tabriz. Agarche zada'i hindam, even though I'm a son of India, farokh chashme manast, the glitter of my eyes, the brightness of my eyes, zakhake pake, from the pure dust of Bukhara, Kabul, and Tabriz. And this is the mu'jiza, right? The karamat of civilization in India, that we were able to unite so many civilizations into one, right? And when people talk about a melting pot, they have not seen what we did in India under Zaire حكم إسلامي زير حكم مسلماني, right? And this is something that we have lost, right? Something that we, for example, does anybody know what the Salar Jung Museum is in Hyderabad, Deccan? Has anybody heard of that museum?
Yeah.
Does anybody know, forget about Farsi books or Urdu books, does anybody know how many Arabic manuscripts, unedited, unpublished, sit in that museum, untouched, for 400 years? Did anybody know? 200,000 unpublished Arabic books written by Mughal Indian scholars, untouched, unpublished, right? Many of the Hanafi books that ulama in Cairo and in Istanbul use were books that were printed by the Nizam of Hyderabad and Dayat al-Ma'arif in 1885, right? So think about this. So think about a civilization where it's not a single language civilization. It's a civilization that is built on 4 languages. In 1585, there was a book written called the Mirzanama. Can anybody guess what this book was probably about, the Mirzanama? 1585. We have 2 manuscripts, one in Calcutta and one in London. It was translated in 1922 by Bengali alim, the Asiatic publishing press. The Mirzanama was a guide written by a Mughal, a cousin of Humayun, who's the Badshah at that time, about how to be a educated Muslim gentleman. A Mirza was, where does Mirza come from? Amir Zadeh, right? Zada in Farsi means son, Amir means king, so Mirza was a prince. So how do you act as a prince? And the first thing he said that is to be an educated Muslim in India, you have to know 4 languages. Can anybody guess the 4 languages? Arabic, Persian, Urdu, and Turkish. So that means that in fact, we have letters of Aurangzeb, and we'll speak about this later tonight, in his Ruqat al-Alamgiri, published again in Hyderabad in 1920, where his son, Kam Bakhsh, wrote a letter to Aurangzeb saying that, look, I don't want to learn Turkish anymore, why do I have to learn Turkish? And Aurangzeb said that even if it's just me and you in India, you're still going to learn Turkish. Right? And this is this idea, right, of creating a culture, creating a civilization where there are multiple languages, multiple traditions in conversation with each other, right? And if I ask people, for example, there are about 1,800 historical, Mughal-sponsored historical texts from Babur all the way until Shah Alam II, who was the great-grandfather of Bahadur Shah Zafar II, passed away in 1805. If I were to ask the average Indian Muslim out of these 1,800 historical textbooks to name me even 5, just 5. Right? No, and this is not your fault. This is the fault of the education system that has been gifted to us. Right? That we are inheritors of. I'm not criticizing anyone, and but I'm saying that if you and I don't have a firm grasp on tarikh, on sarnavishtagiya as tarikh, as the Afghans say, then what purpose do we have in this world? And the purpose of history, right? It should always come from the Quran. What is the purpose of history? Allah tells us. And the last page of Surah Yusuf, are there any Hafaz of Quran here? Do you know the meaning of the Quran too, or just Hafid? A little bit. Can you, the last page of Surah Yusuf, there's an ayah where Allah speaks about the ethical fact of history. There's 3 ayahs on that page, so it's one of the 3. لقد كان في قصصهم عبرة لأولي الألباب ما كان حديثا يفترى من دون الله لقد كان في قصصهم. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the whole story of Surah Yusuf alayhi salam, what does Allah say? لقد كان في قصصهم عبرة. There's a deep ethical lesson. The second last verse of Surah Hud, what does Allah say? وَكُلًّا نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ مَا نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. That, O Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, why do we tell these stories of you? You know what's so interesting about the Quran? The majority of the Quran is about the past. How many ayahs are about the Day of Judgment or about the future? Can anybody take a guess? Compared to the past, about 2,000-3,000 ayat in the Quran are about the past. So just in that there is a lesson. So for Allah to tell us, right, what is there in your past? What is let you learn, right? مَا نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ تَثْبِيتُ الْفُؤَادِ, as the Arabs say. That it may elevate, that it may strengthen your heart, right? And in everything, as someone who has studied Iqbal in Urdu, in Farsi, in Punjabi, in English for the past 10-11 years, one thing that really, there's another line of his where he says, "O Musalman faqir kaj gulahe, Ramid as-Sinai sawza ahe, dilash nalad, chura nalad, nadanad, nigahe ya Rasulullah nigahe." And then he says, "Musalman sharamsar az begilahist." He says this in Al-Maghani Hijaz. Musalman sharamsar as begilahist. That Muslims have become ashamed for losing their crown. Sharamsar as begilahist. Tu dani ke darjan turasi ma cheez. Do you know what Muslims have inherited after 800 years? Qalimi as qumash padshahis. Iqbal is saying this in Lahore. Qalimi as qumash padshahis. He says one blanket of silk made from kings. right? And this idea of that, what have we inherited, right? What is our legacy? Even, unfortunately, again, if I were to ask the average Muslim, when is the first Urdu book written? The first Urdu book, does anybody know? Let's say, forget the year, that's tough. The poet, who is the poet who wrote the first Urdu book? There's scholars, but they're between two. Siraj Aurangabadi is the first from the Deccan, and the second one is from Lucknow. Ghulam Hamdani Mushafi, 1760. Mir Taqi Mir was the third, right? And again, Urdu is a very new language, right? And so, as Indian Muslims, as people who understand our past, everything is in Arabic, Persian, or Turkic. So to even claim yourself to be an heir to an Indian Muslim and to not know these languages is to me is shocking, right? Because if you are not someone who can access this past, then who is going to access it for you, right? Most people, read Indian Muslim history through English translations. In fact, it's actually an Urdu translation of a Persian text that was then translated into English. So there's a double way of translation. That's like if someone translated the Quran into Urdu and then that Urdu translation translated into English. How much would be lost? Kam faqada bit-tarjuma. How much would be lost in the translation? Right? I don't want to spend too much time on this. But it's important for us to ask these questions, right? What is motivating us, right? In this world, again, we are people who are, a madloom, musta'bad, mustaghad people. But at the same time, how can anyone chart a journey without the past? I mean, I think about this when I read the Quran. كذبت قوم كذبت ثمود المرسلين كذبت أصحاب الأيكة. All of these verses, Allah is telling the Holy Prophet, link yourself to something, right? أم تريدون أن تسألوا كما سئل موسى من قبل. When the Holy Prophet moved to Medina, Allah, when was the first ayat that was revealed? That do the Jews wish to ask you as they asked Musa alayhi salam? Again, linking the Holy Prophet back to Sayyidina Ibrahim, back to Sayyidina Musa, to his own ancestry, to his own lineage. Right? And this idea is that our past, and I think this great Moroccan philosopher who made this point, التراث هو كأمنا. Our turath, our heritage is like our own mother. وكما يلزم علينا أن نحترم أمنا يلزم علينا أن نحترم تاريخنا. That just it's wajib and it's farz on us to honor our mother because we come from the womb of them and our mothers have given birth to us. So too is our past. Our past has given birth to us. Nay? Are we not a product of our past? Should we not honor our past like we honor our mothers? As the Holy Prophet said, الرحم معلق بالعرش. The womb relation is hanging on the throne of Allah. Anyways, this is a separate debate, but this is one of the few paintings of the majority of the Mughal kings. As you know, the word Mughal itself is a wrong term. It was created by the British. They called themselves the Temurian. They never called themselves the Mughals. The Mughals meant Mongolian. The first Mughal king was not Mongolian. Which ethnicity was he? Does anybody know? He was Turkic. He was not Mongolian. This is again another fiction. Many Muslims that I meet tell me that they were Mongolian. They were not Mongolian. Who told you this, right? So you have been taught your own past by people who do not have your best interest at heart, and you have to remember. And I want to get into this in the Aurangzeb lecture. Is that when the British come into India, and we have so many texts because they are a very militantly writing empire, right? They document everything. We have so many records from the East India Trading Company, from Queen Victoria's period. And one thing they are super and incredibly nervous about is that Muslims have ruled India for the past 800 years before they come, right? And because of their nervousness and anxiety in that moment, what do they have to do? They have to denigrate Muslims, right? They have to show that Muslims are not native to the land. They have to show that Muslims are foreign. So the colonial British project then becomes rooted in an erasure of the Muslim past, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this throughout the Quran, and I don't want to get into too much tafsir because it's about history. When we look at a painting like this, was painted in 1785 in Lucknow under the Shuja' al-Dawla, who was the Nawab. You have Taimur, you have Babur's ancestors, Sultan Abu Sa'id Mirza, Omar Sheikh Mirza, then you have Babur, Humayun Akbar, Jahangir Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb, Bahadur Shah Awal, Jahandar Shah, Farukh Siyad, Muhammad Shah, Ahmad Shah, Alamgir Sani, and then I believe that Shah Alam II. And this is 300 years of history, right? And many Muslims, unfortunately, when they hear the word Mughal, they think of two things. First, they think of Kale Asus Mughal Azam. And the second thing they think of is the word Ayashi. I've heard this throughout the world, the word Ayashi. And it really infuriates me. Why does it infuriate me? Because to rule an empire as vast, does anybody know the farthest extent to the west the Mughal Empire reached? Just the farthest major city. Does anybody know? Kandahar. And the east, does anybody know the farthest they reached in the east? Under Aurangzeb's period. Burma. Rangoon. Actually, farther than Rangoon. Bordering Cambodia. His general, Zulfikar Khan, may Allah have mercy on him, took Assam. And then the south, how far did they go? Madras. Aurangzeb took Madras in 1685, after he took Hyderabad and then Pune. And to think that to build an empire like this and everybody's ayash and watching tawa'if and listening to music, smoking hookah, you can't rule an empire like this that's 300 different ethnicities, 300 different languages, and everybody's ayash. And it's the same Khandan al-Taimuri. So you have to remember that, right? This is a history that has been erased and wiped out in front of your eyes. And I will always give people this statistic. Does anybody know, before Babur came into India in 1526, the first battle of Panipat, how many Muslims statistically were in India? When I say India, I mean pre-partition India from Peshawar until Dhaka. Does anybody know statistically how many percent of Muslims? Take a guess, anybody?
10%?
4.5%. How much percent of India was Musalman when Cyrus Radcliffe drew the lines between East and West Pakistan in 1947? Ye baat to malum honi chahiye. How many? 40%, 42%. Imagine, and also Muslims had ruled India for 400 years before Babur, right? From Muhammad ibn Tughlaq, Muhammad Ghori, Alauddin Khilji. So 40, and you also have to remember that Hinduism is a deep and ancient religion. The average Maulana graduate is not going to be able to debate with a Hindu Pandit. So you have to first intellectually create a civilization where you can debate the Pandits and show them, right? What's the ayah in Surah Tawbah, as well as in Surah Fath? هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى والدين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره الكافرون. It's this idea of إظهار الدين, right? To intellectually show what Islam can give to the world, right? And that only happened in the Mughal Empire, right? Where for the first time, and I will talk about this, that under Akbar, he had what did Akbar do? Muhammad Jalaluddin Akbar ibn Humayun ibn Baba, is that he had Sufi ethical texts translated into Sanskrit and Sanskrit texts translated into Persian. A dialogue, right? And this is the first time the Brahmins were like, this is something that I am very intellectually curious by, right? That this is a faith. This is something I can get behind. And if you don't create that dialogue, right, between civilizations, then why would anybody convert to Islam, right? And so to bring Islam at the highest level, at the most elevated plane on existence, right? Akbar translated the Mahabharata into Persian, called it the Ramzanama, right? And then he had the Vedic text, thank you, translated into Persian as well, the Upanishads and Darushuko as well. And this is important. And whatever your thoughts are, and we should have a whole lecture on Akbar, and everybody, just thinks about him again, either through Mughal Azam or Deen Ilahi. Deen Ilahi was never even used by him, but again, this is people just hear stuff and they repeat it. There were eight historical texts written in Akbar's period. He was dyslexic, by the way. He couldn't read or write. There were 8 written by his chroniclers. If I were to, I know if I were to ask a masjid in Lombard or Naperville, not one uncle would be able to tell me one name of that book. Yeah, Abki Tarikh. I'm third generation in America, so for me to resurrect this. I have to dig through a lot of dust, right? And it's unfortunate that as brilliant as our civilization was in just 100 years, people I think about just the language of Farsi. There were more Farsi books written just in the city of Hyderabad for 300 years than the entire Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. Can you believe that? I'm not even talking about Arabic books. I'm just talking about Farsi books. Why have we stopped? And I mean, we know anybody who grew up in Aurangabad in the 1950s will know that what is that phrase? Parho Farsi becho thel देखो खुदा का ये खेल وتلك الأيام نداولها بين الناس, right? And this is, they realize this, right? And I'm sure many people here whose grandparents spoke and read Farsi, right? Why did Iqbal wrote about 12,000 lines in poetry? Does anybody know how much percent or how many lines were in Farsi? 7,000. Why did he write? Why was he writing in Farsi? He was a Punjabi from Sialkot. Truly, no, this is something to think about, right? What is us, that these languages are languages that we have adopted and that we have produced so much. You know, I mean, if anybody knows Khalil Center, Dr. Human, who's the founder of it, I was just with him yesterday, and we were talking about mental health before Europe, or mental health in Islam before the Europeans. What did we produce on mental health? If I were to ask someone, you know, there were hundreds of Mughal unedited texts sitting in the Rampur Library in Rajasthan, sitting in the Salar Jung Library in Hyderabad, sitting in the National Archives in Delhi. If I were to ask them, just name me one text on this, right? You know, and I'm not here to put anybody on the spot, but it's sad, right? What are our values, right? And so when I get it, we've come to America to get educated, understand that, but what are Muslims contributing if they don't even understand what we have produced in our past? What is your methodology? What has the Quran taught you about this? But more significantly, what have Muslims done for 1400 years vis-a-vis all these different domains of science and knowledge, right? And I wish we could have a session just on Islamic legal theory. Because you have to remember, in Mughal India, from Kandahar until Burma, until Madras, you had Hanafi qadis at every single court, the mahkama or the panchayat or anything like this, and that means that we were able to navigate legally, civilizationally, philosophically through the Sharia, through Islam, right? Where are those conversations, right? Why was that not ever taught to us? You know, and there are tens of thousands of what we call the Iqrar-name, Hiba-name, Mahazar-name, Sijillat, the Farmans, the Sanans, the Nishans. All of this, think about it, right? To convert land like, by the way, India in square miles is as big as Europe, if not bigger. In square, it's just on the map, it's shown as smaller, in square miles. So to convert Europe, or India, 40% of the people into Islam in just 250 years. In a civilization that's as ancient as the Brahmins. I mean, that is truly something that you have to think about, right? And where are those texts? I mean, Aurangzeb's older brother, whom he wrote translations. He would go, Darashiko would go and sit with these Brahmin Pandits and debate them through the Hanafi madhab, through the Qadri Sufi silsila. And we have those texts, right? But if I were to ask again, what is the name of those texts? What did he say? What sources of Islam did he use? Through Ibn al-Arabi and Ahmad al-Hindi and Abdul Qadir al-Jilani and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi and Ibn Taymiyyah. Aurangzeb's daughter, does anybody know her name? Zaybun Nisa. She was a Hafidha of the Quran. Aurangzeb's daughter, when she became Hafidha, this is written, by the way, not written in Mughal text. This is written, Francois Bernier, who was a French traveler that came to India in 1645, I want to say, and he comes into Delhi. And all of Delhi is lit up. And he's like, what's going on? He's like, the king's daughter has just memorized the Quran. And he shut down the whole city for 3 days. And later on, she became a Farsi poet. Her Takhallus is a pen name, was Makhfi. And we have her divan. Why is that not taught to our daughters? Right? What a beautiful book of poetry. Why is that not taught? And then, you know, for us, Islam is just the first 100 years, Salahuddin Ayyubi, and then it's us. Why 1400 years? What's Allah saying? رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. This is a miniature of can anybody guess? First Mughal king, Muhammad Zahiruddin Babur. He is I just want to spend some time on him. This is, perhaps, we were just talking about some of the greatest Muslim kings. I would put him up, higher than Salahuddin Ayyubi in terms of knowledge, in terms of just square kilometers of conquest, in terms of number of battles that he won, in terms of ingenuity. He was a Hanafi alim, by the way. He wrote a text in Turkey called Al-Mubayyan, which is a summary of Al-Hidayah. For those who are ulama or know people who are ulama, this is a major text that we studied when we were in madrasa. Al-Hidayah, it's covered over 2 years. He wrote a summary of that. He was also a Farsi poet and a Turki poet, and he could read Arabic. If this is the level of a Badshah, you can imagine what the alim level is at that time. And the book that he's reading, by the way, I did some research, is Sa'di's Gulistan, right? Sa'di has two major books, Gulistan and Bustan. He's reading the Gulistan there, right? And by the way, the most, Sa'di, by the way, Sheikh Muslihuddin Sa'di Shirazi, rahimahullah, Iranian poet, Sunni Hanbali, passed away, I believe, 1285. The most amount of Gulistan manuscripts are found in India. They're not found in Iran. Think, like, this is a knowledge of culture, learning, transmission, that we don't care where it comes from, as the Holy Prophet said, Al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min, faman wajada fa ahaqqu bihi. The wisdom of all these civilizations is the lost treasure for the believer. فَمَنْ وَجَدَهَا فَهُوَ أَحَقُّ بِهِ. जो उसने पाया वो ज़्यादा हकदार है उस चीज़ की. He's more entitled to it. He's more deserving of it. And this is what Muslims have done for so. I mean, again, you have to ask this question: when the British come to India? By the way, there are no majority Christian cities in India. Goa, they say it's 50%, but it's more like 40-45%. The British ruled India for 200 years. There's no majority Christian cities in India. So how did that? They had more technology. They had better, quote unquote, military, whatever that means. They had, in technology, industrialization. Why did nobody convert to Christianity? And yet we have 600 million Muslims between India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Truly, that's a question to ask, right? And this is something that I wish people could reflect more and speak over. And he, for example, Imam Bukhari is buried in Samarkand. I was just in Uzbekistan last year to visit his hometown. I spent a month in Uzbekistan, and I went to his hometown as a Hyderabadi Muslim kid, 500 years after poor king. He's buried in Kabul, died in Agra, and he has a memoir called the Baburnama. And nobody knows this, but the first pre-modern memoir of the entire human civilization was written by him. First Mughal Hanafi Sunni king. Who reads it? And it's unfortunately we have Islam here, we have culture here, food is somewhere in between, and imagine, right? If we could train our kids. And I have read so many. Does anybody know what the genre of tabaqat is? It's a genre of works that we used to produce in Mughal, Indian, and Ottoman Empire. Tabaqat is biographical data entries of different ulama, different Sufis, etc., and so forth. I have read through so many tabaqat works of hundreds of Mughal scholars, munshis, who are scribes at the court. By the age of 11 or 12, they would be able to read Arabic text. These are kids who are born and raised in Lucknow and in Hyderabad. Why has that been lost? Now I meet a 12-year-old kid, and if he can read English, so it's truly something, right? What about rethinking education for our children? The American public school education system is not the best in the world, nor does it, I think, even compare to what we had in Mughal India. To produce scholars like we did, right? Again, and it's so unfortunate that when I go to the Arab world, they know Mughal scholars better than the Indian Muslim will know. If I go to the masjid and I ask someone to name me 5 Mughal ulama out of about 15,000, just 5. Why has that been lost? Why do we not talk about it? Why do we not talk about them? Obviously, we can say it's a loss of language. We don't know what these texts are. We don't know who these people are. I wish Shawalillah Muhaddad Dahlawi. What a figure. Truly, what a figure. The Salafis in Saudi Arabia today, by the way, do not have hadith sanad except through him. Imagine, through a Mughal hadith scholar. All just through, he came to Medina Munawwara when he was 22 in 1735, I believe. And it's just how to even think about this, right? When BJP or Hindu fascists are saying Aurangzeb did this, Aurangzeb did that. That is only one part of it. Even if we were to justify their actions or defend ourselves, what about all of this knowledge? Right? Let's say tomorrow, Ahwali Musalman dar Hindustan, it becomes better. Then what? Let's say tomorrow Islamophobia ends. Then what happens? Because for 1,200 years we didn't really have Islamophobia, right? So it's thinking about what is even higher than that, right? And again, my goal as a Maulana is to make sure that people see Islam intellectually, spiritually, ethically, legally, all of that. But at the same time, obviously I can't do everything myself. And as parents, right, imagine by the age of 12, if our kids could read Arabic and Persian and Urdu again. I recently just wrote an article called The Death of Urdu in America. I think Sana will share it with you guys soon. And it's truly sad. I interviewed dozens of Muslims from born and raised in California, dozens of Muslims from California to Chicago, and it's truly bhai se gham baat hai, and it breaks my heart, that people will not be able to read Iqbal Shikwa in just 20 years in America anymore. And I think how important that was for me, as a Muslim, this is a really, really important moment in India. I wanted to just touch upon it. In 1765, Aurangzeb's great-great-grandson, Shah Alam II, who was the grandfather of Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was the last Mughal king of India, waged a battle against the East India Trading Company under the sovereignty of Robert Clive, I believe, Lord Robert Clive. He was the Mughal king, the Nawab of Lucknow, Shuja' al-Dawla. As a Hyderabadi Muslim, very ashamed of this fact, the Nizam of Hyderabad did not send any troops, although he should have. Shah Alam had told him, so there's 8 Nizams. The first Nizam is Mir Qamar Din Khan Asif Jah Awal, and then he has a son, and then his son's brother was ruling during Shah Alam's era, and he should have sent an army, but he didn't. And as a Hyderabadi Muslim, it's thodi si sharmindagi ki baat hai, but still, Lucknowi Muslims can feel proud. Anyways, they still lost the battle though. Unfortunately, to the British, it was the first battle that they lost. This is a British artist who painted it. That's Shah Alam II. That's the Takhte, how do you say peacock in Urdu? Tawus? Takhte Tawusi. It was called the peacock throne. And he has to sign a sanad where Bengal, this is undivided Bengal, going to the British. And Bengal, by the way, was the wealthiest region of the Mughal Empire. 1/4 of the Mughal GDP came from Bengal. Textiles, right? Textiles all came from. And this is the treaty that he signs in 1765, 3 years after the death of Shah Waliullah. And he signs over the Divan with the right to collect taxes and income and revenue from Bengal. And this is also, by the way, Robert Clive becomes pretty much a multi-billionaire, goes back to London, lives in Westminster Abbey, goes into the bathroom, shoots himself in the head. لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. Right? The amount of death he caused to both Muslims and Hindus in India, and the effects of that violence does not leave a person, does not leave a human being in this world or the afterlife. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَاهُ تَقْدِيرًا. Right? But what's really fascinating about this, right, is that you can sort of say that this is the beginning of the end. But what I find super interesting is that despite the loss of political sovereignty, is that just about 10 years before this humiliating treaty is signed with the Mughal king, the first Urdu book is written. And Urdu as a culture comes alive. So despite our political and military losses, people are still writing, people are still learning, people are still teaching, people are translating, right? And this idea of ilm, or of knowledge, right? Just the absolute love of knowledge, of our tradition, never died, no matter where, no matter our political circumstances, right? And this is something that I always want to emphasize. How am I doing on time? Just 20 more minutes, right?
Yeah, maybe
Almost done.
10 minutes,
Yeah.
we'll do 10 minutes and then Q&A.
Sure.
Yeah, 10 minutes and Q&A.
I wanted to this is a Mughal manuscript, unedited, untouched, unpublished. This is on medicine from the 17th century, right? And deals with mental health, deals with, bodily illnesses, physical illnesses, all of this stuff, as you can see. قال أبو بكر محمد بن زكريا الرازي الطبيب, يعني a physician, أن جامع الأمير, etc., etc., etc. And then you see the Mughal alim saying here, which year that he wrote it in. And as Muslims, right, to think that we can produce through our own value system, through our own ethical system, with confidence, right? Why do we have to do taqleed of other cultures and other systems of thought? This is not saying we don't learn from others. But the Holy Prophet ﷺ gave us a methodology, a manhaj, by which we can judge other sciences. And this is not to reject or ignore any other civilization or other system of thought. But I, as a student of Mufti Amin, who does Islamic bioethics, right? This is important that Muslims can intellectually think and contribute to the world. Because if you don't contribute with your own independent system or paradigm or methodology, then what are you but a muqallid? What are you, just a third-rate, thinker, right? This is, as Muslims, we were always producing, right? Asking other civilizations to challenge them to think with us, right? A lot more to say here, but we can sort of conclude here. I didn't want to take too much time, but jazakallah khair. So much more to say. Actually, this is just 10% of the presentation, but yeah.
Okay. Jazakallah for that. We're gonna have some question and answers, just some comments from me. Make sure you follow him on Instagram or Facebook. Where's the best place to?
I'm not really. I hop off social media. Yeah.
Okay. We'll get you his email. But what he's doing, I really think, and when you see like a book, like someone's blowing the dust off of something, I myself wanted to know what it meant to be an Indian Muslim. I tried to learn Urdu in college. I took 1 year in Tutti Putti Urdu. Still the same. I can't speak Farsi. But what I wanted to go where I wanted to say that highlight the importance of this, it also boils down to our self-esteem and self-identity. Sometimes people are like, oh, who are you recommending for me to talk to for my insurance? I'm like, oh, Munir Ahmed. They're like, oh, do you know a white guy? Like, why are you saying that? Why don't you trust Munir Ahmed? Why don't you trust Shahabuddin? Why don't you trust Rubina Iqbal? Like, it translates into how we identify ourselves. He said the two things people associate with being Mughal is Ayashi and Mughal Azam. I don't think this is our heritage to be historical bimbos. When I look in the mirror with my brown skin and my black eyes and my black hair, I shouldn't feel I have to call Steve Smith to be my lawyer. I can call Rubina Iqbal, I can call Munir Ahmed, and this is the legacy of such a deep empire. Not even the British Empire could even account for this much spiritual wealth. And I really find it disheartening that you said Salahuddin Ayyubi. I know those names, right? We all know Salahuddin Ayyubi, Sultan Fateh, and the list goes on and on. But then, as Indian Muslims, and I think this is the thing, we love to be pan-Islamic. That is a beautiful thing. But we must also appreciate that this brown skin is beautiful, our history is beautiful, Farsi is beautiful, Urdu is beautiful, Turkish is beautiful, but we also have to appreciate ourselves. And what he said about bringing these things into our curriculums is a huge thing, right? And it's not just to say, hey, we were there, now we're here. No, because the way they administered government, the British always like to say, oh, we built roads, we built trains, we did this, we did that. But guess what? We also did that. So when you look in the mirror, you have a legacy of governance in your blood and deep spiritual insight. In movies, sometimes they have like this black guy comes in out of nowhere and he slides in and he says something deep and then he slides out of the picture. And so like they've given that deep spiritual thing to black people, like have spiritual insight. But what I'm telling us is that we have a deep, deep history. And this is unusual that we become historical bimbos and we only care about Zabiha food that revolves around Roosevelt Road. Doesn't make any sense. Sorry for my diatribe and the comments, but I had to say that. Okay, let's go to a question and answer.
Sure.
Yeah. Would like to have any questions?
How do we get the facts? Who checks your facts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, look, at the end of the day, as a historian, nobody will ever have 100%. Everyone's dead, right? Old Aurangzeb is dead, Babur is dead, Shivaji is dead, they're all dead, right? But what we can do is read historical works that were produced in that period, right? And you cross-check it with other books. You speak to other scholars. People have devoted their lives to this, right? And so a lot of people, what they do is they just read one English translation of a book. And you ask them, where is that history coming from? Right? At least if you're reading, let's say, Mahasir Alamgiri, right? Which is a contemporary text that I'll reference today in Aurangzeb's lecture. That was a book written by Aurangzeb's vizier. I can have like some reliance on it, but I won't just use that. Aurangzeb had a Hindu general who also wrote a book, Tarikh Dil-Kusha, also about Aurangzeb. I'll use that book too. Now, what I'll also use is that the Marathas also wrote some books too. And
are these books in publication or
no, they're not, because our Muslims have not cared about it. In fact, the only place that you'll find are some British scholars. Maybe some old scholar sitting in, Chandni Chowk in Delhi, but that's it. They're not. Like, maybe they translate into Urdu. I'm not sure. I really love Mughal Persian, so I try to read as much as I can in Mughal Persian. But I wish it was published. And maybe in 1880s it was, but yeah.
This is very informative. I appreciate your talk on Aurangzeb and Mughal Empire. Mughal Empire, like you say, they were not lavish. They were very pious. Tozak Babari and his daughter, Gulbadan Begum, wrote enormously about the art of appreciation of Iman and governance and Taqwa. Being the daughter of Zahiruddin Babar, she wrote Gulbadan Banu's history of Gulab, means a rose. So she had, all were scholars in their own understanding, because you get amazed at their beauty, their architecture, their culture is so rich. Nobody can, no civilization can match that much of civilization and powerful messages and poetry. Coming to Aurangzeb Alamgir Rahmatullah Alayhi, I will wait the question, but I will just say, I tell my children that if there are 10 top generals in Islamic history, Aurangzeb is definitely in the top 10 generals of military generals. He conquered the West and more broadest empire. Never India had not severed, no other empire has built. From Thailand to Kabul and Kandahar and all, even touched the Asfahan almost there. So he was on 52 years, even though he had lot of difficulty from his mother, who wanted to Dara Shikobi to be the heir apparent, but he said, no, I am doing this for humanity, I am doing this for piety, serving to humanity and Islam. So he conquered, and there's historians, Allama Shibli Nomani wrote the books about Alamgir Alayhi Rahmah, that 52 years non-stop he slept on the back of the horse, means he slept, he rode, and in the night he slept on the ground. So he continued. In Deccan was the most difficult to conquer, because those kingdoms of Krishna Nagar, Maharaja Krishna Nagar, they were very fierce fighters. But only Alamgir can do that one, because he sieged the town of Hyderabad in 40 days, and that's how Aurangzeb Alamgir. And thank to God that we were Muslims, because Akbar has taken away a different path. So to make it Hanafi and Islam, or Islam as a thing, he was never biased. He's all military, like they say. 60% of his generals were Hindus. When he thinks that he broke the temples or demolished, he demolished some masajid also, because they were illegal. So he wanted that to be based on Sharia. Assalamu alaikum. So, very good.
Please, yeah.
You said there are 200,000 books in Hyderabad, Salarjung Museum, unpublished,
unedited,
and that is a Muslim heritage.
Muslim heritage, yeah.
And India is erasing the Muslim period out of history.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then that heritage is at risk.
Yeah.
Is there any attempt by any group how to save that?
No, and it's a tragedy, because Muslim Indians here, if they study another language, it'll be Arabic. They'll never study, Farsi, or they don't believe that there's anything there. Because again, and I, someone who was in graduate school, I see Muslims, they see Muslims. Obviously most people are doing medicine and law, right? And engineering or CS or some venture capital thing. The 10% who do that, they see Hamari log hai, they will go and do Ottoman history. In all of my classes, I'm the only Muslim. There's 4 Hindus and 5 white guys. That's even when I want to do Mughal history, my dad was not like, what do you just watch Mughal Azam, stuff Jesus man, but that's understanding. My dad is a very dedicated tablighi, and he's with Tablighi Jamaat for 25 years, and he's like, just watch what do you study these people for? Born and raised in Hyderabad. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I wonder about whether the Middle Eastern governments, they should be made aware of this.
They
thing.
should, yeah.
And maybe they should uplift those books.
Like imagine if we could just, from America, we could just dedicate five kids maybe $300,000 we crowdfund. For the next 10 years, we say you learn Arabic, you learn Persian. Because remember, there's Iranian Persian, there's Mughal Persian. It's a little bit different. We write differently. We have different words. We have a little bit different grammar, different expressions. And you just study this. We also have 4 different scripts in Mughal India just for Farsi. Taleeh, Naskh, Shikasta Divani, etc. Learn all of these scripts. And then spend the next 10 years of their lives just researching, and they have to be Indian Muslims because if they're Pakistani, they won't get into India, and just read. I mean, I can go, ek aadmi kitna kar sakta hai, right? So it's like, yeah, I can go and sure, do 2-3, but just one book will take someone 2-3 years. Each book is, 200 folios. You guys have seen these old books. Imagine, and imagine how we could contribute to the world, right? Like, imagine, just imagine where we could start. And look, I don't want to make this about a oligarch or Sayyid Ahmad Khan thing, but there is definitely a moment in the 19th century where Muslims are telling other Muslims, don't worry about this past anymore. So I'm not going to blame anyone, but there is that moment, and I don't want to, So that's बहुत मुझे बहुत दुख देता है और अफसोस की बात है that we as Muslims should have done a better job to especially in that moment of colonialism, to present more. And I don't know, some of you I'm sure, but Rahmani was one person. Muhammad Iqbal can only become Muhammad Iqbal because of the Indian Muslim past. You have to ask, the entire Muslim world was colonized besides Iran, Afghanistan, and Turkey. No Muslim country produced Iqbal. So why? Truly, you have to ask that question. Why did Shikwa only come out of India? Algeria was colonized for 250 years, by the way. Right? Lebanon, Palestine, Iraq, Syria, Malaysia, Indonesia, by the Dutch. Why did only India produce Iqbal? Truly, I asked myself, when I memorized the Shikwa, I was in a madrasa, Urdu madrasa, but I was like, why did we produce Iqbal? That's something to ask. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think this is a deeper conversation. I think we should make a point and a note about how we are going to maintain this. Because I was just thinking about, Tipu Sultan's relics are in the Queen's cabinet or somewhere in Britain, and they're giving all these historical things back. I was like, should I lie? Would we tell India to try to get Tipu Sultan stuff? But then I'm like, would they throw it in the trash? Do I tell Pakistan? But Mysore's in India. And so I was like, do I call Turkey because they have great museums? Do I call Saudi Arabia? I don't know, because they're against relics. I think we might worship Tipu Sultan. Astaghfirullah. Right? So all these things were going through my head. But just one programming note. I think the scholarship about we need to create this, and I think this is a real conversation that needs to be had about learning Mughal, Persian, Urdu, Turkic script.
Instead of just one more community center, we scrap the community center. We just invest in 5 Indian Muslim kids to just study this for the next 20 years. $300,000-$400,000, we can publish dozens and dozens of books, and we can not only just reform our condition, we can challenge dominant Western medical paradigms, Western legal paradigms with our own civilization of 1,000 years.
Okay, so
sir.
Jazakallah, that was amazing. We're gonna have.
Thank you.
We're gonna have some lunch, some meet and greet, socialize, get to know one another. It'd be great that we at least get to know each other's names so we can exchange ideas. One person here can reach 10 people, so it's great to network. Inshallah, in this next half an hour, we're gonna have some lunch, and then we'll start the next talk after that, inshallah.